Welcome to Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
I'm always have been a firm believer in finishing what you start. And sometimes the lesson you have to learn, you haven't learned it yet. If you quit too early in the game, you'll never know what there was. So stick it out.
Hello, this is Grant Frazier, co-host of Measuring Success Right. This week's episode is a rebroadcast of a 2019 episode with Noelani Kamalu. This is a really wonderful episode, and since we've gained some new followers of the podcast since this originally aired, we thought this was a conversation worth sharing again. It's also a great idea to check out Kamalu's 2019 TED Talk at BYU, where she goes into depth about her heritage, experiences, and the history of the Hawaiian Renaissance. We'll have a link to that in our show notes, but without further ado, please enjoy this episode.
Hello, everybody. This is Jenny with the Measuring Success Right podcast, and we're happy to have you here today. Today, we are with Noelani Kamalu, and she is a crew member of the historic voyaging canoe Hokule'a. The canoe was built as a replica of an ancient Polynesian vessel during the Second Hawaiian Renaissance, a time that saw the revitalization of Hawaiian culture and pride after decades of negative stereotypes. The Hokule'a's successful voyage to Tahiti in 1976 played a major factor in reigniting cultural identity. Kamalu's parents moved to Hawaii when she was a child in order to provide her and her sisters the opportunity to learn about their culture and heritage. She attended a Hawaiian immersion school, received her bachelor's in Hawaiian language, and has spent the last decade teaching at a Hawaiian-focused charter schools. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, man. So excited to hear about what it's like to voyage a canoe. That is something I've never done before.
Yeah, it's hard to do that in Utah.
Yeah. So I've seen Moana. Mm-hmm. But paint me a picture of what the canoes you're voyaging look like.
Oh, actually, so Moana was largely inspired by the canoe voyage. Obviously, Moana is a little bit smaller, so we're at 62 feet long. But essentially, in fact, my mentor from the Hokule'a was one of the technical advisors for the film. So it's very closely, mirrors what we do. Yeah, like it's a little bit bigger. A little bit more details there, but yeah.
Very cool. And so is this a one-person boat?
Okay, yeah, good point. So 62 feet long, 20-something feet wide. Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a deep-sea voyage, like from Hawaii to Tahiti, you have about 12 to 13 people on board. So,
wow. So this is a team effort.
Oh, yes.
And so what does it take to be a successful voyager?
Oh, that's a good question. You mean actually finding land? No, I'm just kidding. I think it goes back to what you just said. It's a team effort. That's one of the biggest things you take away from traveling with people over 2,500 miles is you have to be a team player and learn to respect, everyone's work and efforts on the canoe. But a lot of the success of a voyage actually starts on land. We like to tell people about 80% of sailing starts on land. It's all in the preparation. Everything from a sail plan to loading the canoe to preparing the vessel itself. I mean, she has to be seaworthy. Yeah. Learn all your skills before you even leave the dock. So like I said, 80% before you've even left.
That's super important, though, because what can you do once you're in the middle of the ocean?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you have to, but essentially you want to be as prepared as you possibly can be before you've left the dock.
For sure. So tell me a little bit more about that training experience, the physical training.
Oh, the physical training.
Impossible.
It is not impossible, but there is a physical fitness requirement. There's some pull-ups you have to do and a swim test. But a lot of it, beyond learning like knots and how to steer this canoe, to quote Nainoa, my mentor, he can train skill, but you can't train trust. And at the end of the day, we'll take someone we trust with our life and we'll trust is going to do the job. And even if they might not be the best sailor in the world, if we know they'll put their heart and their effort into it, they're more likely to get on the crew than, the person who's going to win a regatta. So
that is very interesting. Yeah. Do you get along with everyone on this canoe?
I think we all have moments when we have differences of opinion, but I think we've learned throughout the years how to better work together because we understand we're all out there collectively trying to make sure we're safe and we find land. And so there aren't really too many altercations on board or anything. It's not like that. Like I said, might have a difference of opinion, but we have learned better how to work that out now. So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
What for us college students, we have group projects, but we can always walk away from them. You know? What advice would you give to a student who's not in the middle of the ocean and has every ability to just walk away from a team?
Oh my gosh, every ability to walk away from a team. You know, I maybe it's just me. I'm always have been a firm believer in finishing what you start. And sometimes the lesson you have to learn, you haven't learned it yet. If you quit too early in the game, you'll never know what it was. So stick it out. And you know what? If it turns out by the time you've finished, or like for us, by the time we've reached that island, maybe we won't work with those people ever again. That's maybe the lesson you need to learn. But finish what you start. And you know what? And it just turns out that relationship might change too. I've had people that I thought I'd never sail with, but stuck it out, and they've turned out to be some of my best friends and crewmates on board. So you never know.
Oh, how nice. I was really intrigued by what you said, that you never know the lesson that you'll learn when you finish.
Yeah.
Could you share one of those lessons you learned?
Oh, goodness. One of the lessons I've learned. I think, so one of the lessons I learned, so I came to Provo on this trip to participate in the TEDx talks. And I think that's still the biggest lesson that I learned, what I shared in my talk. The idea of caring for one another. Because whether it's on the deck of the canoe or just in this vast planet we live on, I think just learning to have that respect and care for one another will dictate some of the decisions we need to empower us to make decisions to create a better future. And whether that means simple things like deciding that, hey, maybe I will pick up this piece of trash so someone else doesn't have to do it, or whatever it is. Even the small things matter, they add up. But really, I learned a lot about relationships with people and how much it really matters and how connected we really are. So
that is very tender. Thank you for sharing. Man, I'm learning so much already. It's obvious that you have a strong passion for the Hawaiian language, which I would just like to hear a little bit more about. What made you want to study it as your major? What made you want to continue to teach it?
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So actually, so I was born right here. I'm a college baby, born in Provo, but parents decided to move back to Hawaii. Before I got into kindergarten, they wanted us to grow up there and learn about our culture, who we are. So I was enrolled in a Hawaiian immersion school as a kid. So I'd say as a young child, was it my choice necessarily? No. But it was something I grew to appreciate and understand. Then later on, when I was pursuing my college degree, I actually was going in for mechanical engineering. It was actually a point in my life where I just needed to finish school, though, if we're being honest. Finish what you start. So I finished my degree, and at the time, I looked at what I had, and I said, I can graduate with Hawaiian language. So I graduated with Hawaiian language. And my plan B was always to be a teacher. We can talk about my plan A maybe at another point. But I always considered teaching. And so the reason I chose to go back into Hawaiian immersion and charter schools was because I had an appreciation for my education as a child, because I went to the immersion schools in the early 90s, and this was a tough time. The programs were just starting, and the sacrifices that people made to give me that opportunity were tremendous. And so it's kind of a give back and honoring that. And so that's kind of one of the big reasons I decided to go back into education. I actually primarily teach math and science. So, but obviously with my own spin and context in Hawaii. So, yeah.
So cool. I so appreciate that. Because that's so important that you feel like you want to pay back to those people who originally taught you Hawaiian.
So, and I still eat lunch with them every now and then.
Oh, that's so wild. They're still there teaching.
Yeah, they are.
That's so cool.
So,
I love those stories that come full circle.
Yeah.
So you mentioned maybe that you had a plan A and you kind of had to pivot. We get that.
Yes.
We're also college students.
Yes.
Tell me more about
My
that.
plan A was to fly airplanes. So I am still teaching, but I'm now pursuing that. I am hopefully going to get my private pilot license when I return home to Hawaii. And going back to that same theme of finishing what you start, I am actually a UVU student, a global aviation student. So
Excellent.
I started the degree years ago, had to drop it for a few reasons. And recently, in the last year and a half, I thought, you know what? It's time to finish it. So
Good for you.
So you might take a little bit longer to finish some things in life, but, take the opportunity to try.
Yeah, life is long. It's
Yeah.
the longest thing we'll ever do.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what have you ever felt any regrets about some of these pivots you've had to make? Sometimes we're scared to pivot because we feel like there might be regrets later on.
Yeah, so we can go back to that one. Some financial regrets, I guess. It's costing me a lot more in the long run because if I had done it a different way, maybe I wouldn't be in so much debt. Mostly that. There are sometimes I wonder, if I had done the flying first, where would I be in my career? But then I think about the opportunities I've had because I chose to go the other route. And that probably includes the ability to sail in Hokule'a. I think if I had done the plan A first, flying, that I might not have been in the right place physically, spiritually, mentally to do that. So I've considered that maybe that's what was supposed to happen.
Very true. That's a good point because I don't know anything about navigation, but is it kind of similar navigating a canoe? Do you sort of understand the system of navigation for planes?
Yeah, actually, even though while we're on board the Hokule'a, where it's all non instrumentation, we do a lot of the sail planning before we leave, like I mentioned. Yes. And so we're still looking at charts and routes and weather conditions. And so that's actually helped tremendously in my flight training. Yeah.
See, so it all does come back together.
It does.
Okay. That's a happy thought.
It is.
What are some challenges you've had that taught you a little bit about what it means to be successful in the things that you wanted to do?
Oh, some challenges. Well, we already mentioned the money challenge. That's, I guess, a challenge for almost everybody. So that's so one of the challenges I've had, specifically related to flight training, since it's what I'm doing right now. So it's actually hard to find flight hours in Hawaii because there aren't as many flight schools. And even before coming here, I had hoped to finish up my training, but you have to deal with weather. I can't fly when it's snowing, for instance, and it happened to be snowing on Maui in February. So it's just things that I didn't anticipate and wasn't able to plan for, but, I'm learning to roll with it. And once I get through my private pilot, then we'll maybe sit down, evaluate. Maybe that means flying somewhere else until I've got my other ratings. So, yeah, that's definitely been a challenge. It's been an ongoing process to get my private pilot license.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I've never thought of that. Yeah. Is that how you typically deal with those challenges? You just come up with another plan to execute? Do you just sort of wallow in it?
Yeah, well, I think everyone wallows for a little bit, right? Like, oh, what's going on? But then, sit back and, okay, well, what can I do to fix it? Can I fix it? I'm very much that type of person. I'm like the puzzle doer, if you will. Like, I like to put puzzles together and Legos and everything. But, and actually, I was going to say, as far as challenges go, I'm pretty sure my UVU advisors are tired of me asking for them to waive my requirements because I don't have my flight time. I keep promising them I'll have my license.
They have to be understanding.
Yeah, I know. I promise I'm trying. So anyway.
That's cool. Just a fun question.
Yeah.
So you said you like puzzles. Tell me about the toughest puzzle. I'd love to know.
Oh my gosh. So I really like the photo mosaic puzzles, which are a little bit insane. So they only average about 500 to 1,000 pieces, but they're all ready mosaics. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That is fun. Do you ever frame them to show off?
There's been a couple I've glued together, but I don't currently have any on display, but I have. Yeah.
That's so excellent. I love hearing that sort of stuff. That's super fun. Well, this is a question we ask all visitors to the podcast. But for you, what is your definition of success? And maybe a story that paints your definition of success.
Oh, that's a good question. I think success is being happy in what you're doing. For some people that may be money. I don't think it's money for me. And that sense of accomplishment. I guess going back to Hokule'a, the canoe that brought me here for the TEDx to begin with, landing on the shores of Tahiti in 2014. That was my first deep sea from Hawaii to Tahiti, and it's a feeling I'll never forget. Your first deep sea, and it's I can't even put words to the experience really, but it was a lifelong goal of mine to do that, and so those personal goals. It might not be related to your career, but if it makes you happy, go do it. Yeah.
Oh, that is so consoling to hear. I don't have a career, but I heard if it doesn't have to do with your major, just do it. Oh, that's so nice to hear. My word. Well, thank you so much for visiting.
Thank you.
Just in case, if there's anything else you'd like to add, something you think I missed, I'm happy to hear it.
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so since this is a show about measuring success, I will share something that I have kind of lived by since I was a kid. So when you attend Hawaiian immersion schools, they have these posters that are put up in the schools, and they're kind of like proverbs. That's the closest equivalent I have. We call them in Hawaiian Noelani. And there's one that I remember as a kid. It was which basically translates to there's no hill too high to climb if you try to climb it. And that's just been like the guiding principles or, in my life, one step at a time and you'll eventually get to the top. So.
Oh, my word. I love that. That is definitely the first time we've had Hawaiian on this podcast. And I so appreciate it.
Hopefully not the last.
Hopefully not the last. Thank you so much. I've learned so much. And now I feel like if I just prepare a little bit in advance, I could climb any mountain I want.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about measuring success right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review or online at marriottstudentreview.org.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect official policy or position of Brigham Young University or The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.